Paul Harris filling in. Kelly Jackson here with me, and so is David Stokes from the Show Me Institute. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
What do you have for us this week?
Well, the governor signed some tax increment financing reform legislation, which is something that we've talked about with you and McGraw many times on this show, and it's exciting. Although, when you fight for subsidy reform in Missouri, you unfortunately have to be satisfied with bits and pieces here or there, because any efforts to really change the system of subsidies and corporate welfare we have in the state is doomed to failure.
Yep.
Although we'll keep fighting. But
you're doomed to failure because those corporations are paying the people in Jefferson City who are writing the laws.
There are some very strong interest groups that benefit a lot from the subsidy system out there, and many of which are justifiable in part and don't need to be eliminated, just need to be tightened up a little bit, like historic tax credits.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with having a historic tax credit for truly historic buildings, but we've gone too far where basically anybody can get them. Private homes on private streets that you're not allowed to go and see can get historic tax credit.
Yeah.
Not to mention many other buildings that are only tenuously historic now.
Okay.
But with TIF reform, the governor signed a law that exempted certain emergency communications taxes from TIF capture, meaning that in St. Charles County now, they just passed a sales tax, a local sales tax, to fund an improved 911 system.
Okay.
And now all of that money will actually go to the 911 system, and a portion of it won't be siphoned off to subsidize developers and existing TIFs.
Right. People will usually agree with a tax if they have a guarantee that the money from that tax is going to go directly to something that helps the public good. This would be a perfect example of that.
This would be, and the problem was that some of it was going to be siphoned off and going to tax increment financing or TIF districts to subsidize developers, and voters don't realize that when they approve these taxes. So that's sort of the headline in the Post-Dispatch story about it. But the bigger news a little further down in the story is it explains that the bill also, and I supported this bill in the session this year. I thought it was good, necessary changes. The most important thing is going forward now, all TIFs, tax increment financing districts, will only capture existing taxes at the time the TIF is established. And that if going forward, sales and property taxes are increased by the voters, the TIF doesn't get a bigger subsidy just because it happens to live in that area.
Okay.
So now this is a very good change, because that's been the result of a lot of confusion. Like, we criticized at the Show Me Institute the arch tax a year and a half ago, because they didn't have that inclusion in it, meaning that when we voted to approve the arch tax in St. Louis City and County, some of that money is going to TIF districts and corporate welfare now. Not the bulk of it, certainly, but some of it. So this is just a good clarification that future tax increases for public services approved by voters won't increase subsidies given previously.
Okay. So just for the arch tax, just an example, that's another one of those things where you were told A, and then they did B. In other words, A was whatever money we raise from the tax is going to help to build out the new arch grounds and fix it up, put the lid on, and all the rest of that stuff. But some of that money was being used for other things. And what's happened in St. Charles is they've made it impossible for those other things to happen now?
Well, they've made it impossible now for the subsidies to be increased for the 911 tax.
Mm-hmm.
So now they passed the sales tax. A portion of that sales tax was being captured by tax increment financing districts, which work by taking within that district, any increase in sales or property taxes goes in part to the developer and not to the taxing district. Now they've clarified that in St. Charles County for this tax and statewide going forward, any increased sales or property tax done after the TIF district is established, that money will all go towards the intended tax purpose and not increase the previously allotted development. Now, for instance, if you had a $10 million subsidy under a TIF previously, now just because you get an increased tax in the future, you won't get a bigger subsidy. You'll still get the same set amount on the same time schedule.
So the money we agreed to pay you is the money we're actually going to pay you.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's crazy talk.
And look, we need to be agreeing to pay developers throughout Missouri a lot less to subsidize their developments.
Yes.
But this is a good small step forward. I'm glad the legislature passed it, and I'm glad the governor signed it.
While I have you here, I have been ranting for a while about the gas tax in this country, which has not gone up, as you probably know, in over 2 decades. It is the federal gas tax is, I believe, 18.3 cents per gallon, maybe 18.4 cents a gallon, hasn't increased in more than 20 years. And the gas tax is one of those taxes that we have in this country where the people who use the product are the ones who drive on the roads that need the repairs, and we have a country where the infrastructure is completely falling apart. And in fact, the federal highway fund, which the gas tax money goes into, is going to run out this summer if Congress doesn't pick up some money from elsewhere in the national budget and put it into that. Isn't it about time that we said, you know what, since we're using less gas, since our cars have become more efficient, which is also driving down the amount of money that you can get from the gas tax, why don't we raise that gas tax and fix our damn roads and bridges?
We should increase the gas tax. That's one of the taxes out there that I support raising. At the state, we mostly focus at the state level,
yes,
but I would agree with it at the federal level.
Has Missouri
as well.
raised it in the last 20 years?
Yes, but only slightly more recently than that. I think it was last raised in the late 90s as part of a series of 2-cent increases. I want to guess like 96, 97, 98. They did it over a series of 3 years.
All right.
So, but it's been a while too. And now what the issue with that is now we're seeing this terrible policy proposal to fund our roads with general sales taxes, which is completely unnecessary. We have the gas tax, which accomplishes all the good things you just explained, and we could increase that to fund for our highways and bridges and roads in Missouri. But because they say, they being the supporters of a higher sales tax, they say it's more politically easy to do, more politically palatable, which I don't necessarily agree with.
I don't either.
But that's their argument, that we're going to totally change the way we fund roads in this state. And now the person who bikes to work or walks to work or has a short commute is going to pay exactly the same for the highways and bridges as the over-the-road trucker, as the person with the hour-long commute to work. They're going to pay the same amount. In fact, the truckers who may not live in Missouri aren't going to pay anything to use the highways. It's really poor policy, and it's really objectionable. There's nothing wrong with people who use the roads more often paying more for the roads.
Absolutely. And again, it is one of the few taxes where the money that goes into that fund goes to a dedicated purpose and can only be used for that purpose. But that fund is going to run dry here because Congress doesn't have the willpower to say, sorry, America, you're going to have to pay a higher tax if you want your roads and bridges to be fixed. And by the way, as I've said many times before, it is to our national shame that we don't have great roads and bridges that are guaranteed of not falling down. I mean, I hate orange cones as much as the next guy, but I'll be happy to have them to make the roads better. Is there anybody in St. Louis who drives on the Page Avenue extension or the new Highway 40 that was rebuilt several years ago who doesn't say, you know what, this is better. I'm really glad that we spent the money to do this? Nobody. So we should raise that gas tax.
I agree. I think we should raise it to fund the infrastructure needs that our state and country have in our local areas. But certainly, in comparison to this very poor idea of a general sales tax.
That's a horrible idea.
Which is just increase, decrease, keep it the same. It's just a bad idea to fund transportation needs like this through general sales taxes when you can fund it successfully through user fees like the gas tax.
David Stokes from the Show Me Institute here every Monday on McGraw Live in the Morning. Thanks, David, for coming in.
Paul, I always enjoy talking with you. Thank you, sir.
Likewise. It's 8:49 at the Big